Amen.
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 All right. Continue unlocking Revelation, and our topic tonight is the remnant of prophecy. So you guys wanted a heavy subject, so you're going to get one. All right.
Boy, are you going to get it?
So the remnant of prophecy. And we kind of talked about this morning when we looked at the 7 churches. The last church would be the remnant church, the last days church. So the concept of the remnant is throughout the Bible, and it means the remainder, the last few that stay faithful to God. But we want to contrast that with the harlot church of prophecy. And we've looked at other nights. We're not going to talk about all these things right now, but we've looked on other nights on the different things that are false teachings in the many of the churches out in the world today. Like, for example, what happens when you die, right? We've seen how the common teaching on that is a big misunderstanding. The truth about hell, lies about end times prophecy. You know, the majority of people are still expecting the Antichrist to come in the future.
Yes.
And they're waiting for the temple to be rebuilt and all that kind of stuff. Dispensationalism, the rapture, and all these misunderstandings of prophecy. And then the majority of the churches in the world believe that the Sabbath has been changed, and the law of God itself has been abrogated. And, this is quite fitting to talk about this again today, we see that the churches are united. Here's a picture of these are the Methodists. The Methodists, I believe, and the Methodist Association and the Catholic Church signing a joint declaration of faith and uniting. And all the major Protestant denominations have done likewise. Here's the Lutherans and the Catholics uniting. Luther would be turning over in his grave, right?
Oh, yeah.
And at the end of this month, October 31st, they call Halloween, is Reformation Day.
Reformation.
And it was 500 years ago this year, in 1517, that Luther, on Reformation Day, nailed the 95 Theses, and we call that the official start of the Protestant Reformation. 500 years ago. And now, they're all united again, right? The evangelicals also uniting with the Catholic Church. Now, so we're discussing the churches. So let's look at God's depiction of His church in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12. We've gone over this on other nights, but we'll go through it kind of quickly tonight. Now a great sign appeared in heaven. Verse 1. Appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. If you go to nearby here, Castroville, there's a Catholic church. Right off of the main road. There's not many other streets off in Castroville, right? It's like one main road. But it's not very hard to find off the main road. There's a Catholic church, and if you look at the front there, they have a mural of a woman with 12 stars and the moon under her feet, and if you look, it's Mary. And they have that as their kind of interpretation of who this woman is. And I don't believe this is talking about Mary. I think this is talking about Israel. Good evening. Please join us. We're on Revelation chapter 1.
Hey!
I'm here.
Please.
There he is, the man of the topic of today.
Yeah.
Earlier today.
Can we say congratulations? Nice to see you guys.
Hi.
Oh, you're doing well.
Good evening to all.
We're in Revelation 12.
Okay.
Yeah, should we give them applause?
Can you reenact what you did? Yeah.
What do you want this one?
Poor guy. Congratulations.
We'll stop embarrassing you.
Very happy.
Thank you.
But you're very happy for you.
So Revelation 12, verse 1. Who is this woman with a crown of 12 stars and clothed with the sun with the moon under her feet? She's contrasted with the harlot in Revelation 17. This woman's not called a harlot. The other one's called a harlot, right? So the one in 17, that's a Babylon, right? And she's decked, the one in 17, in gold and precious stones and pearls. Very Look at me, right?
Flamboyant.
Flamboyant, yes. Whereas this one is, oh, came out of nowhere on me. Whereas this woman has natural God-given light. She's clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. So this is, by contrast, you can see this is the pure woman. Now what is 12? What is the 12 stars?
The 12 tribes.
The
of
12
Israel.
tribes of Israel. This is a symbol of the church Israel. And it says, then being with child, she cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. Verse 2. Oh, that was verse 2. She bore a male child, this is verse 5, who was to rule all nations with the rod of iron, and her child was caught up to God and to his throne. Now, who is this male child?
Jesus.
This is Jesus. And many Bibles, when you read them, you'll see that for child, it is capitalized because the translators recognize this is obviously speaking of Jesus, who was caught up to God's throne. Okay? So, who is this woman with 12 stars that gives birth to Christ? It's the church. It's Israel, which had 12 tribes and gave birth. And Jesus was prophesied to be of the seed of Israel. Right? He came from the Jews.
Right.
Okay. Who is this man child? Well, again, it says he was to rule all nations with the rod of iron. Right? Revelation chapter 19, 1 through 6 has a description of Jesus. And it says on his thigh there's a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Right? And it says his name is called the Word of God. And it says, let's see here. This is verse 1 through 6. I'm just picking parts out of it. And he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. This is Christ, who is to rule all nations with the rod of iron. So that's the male child from chapter 12 that was born, that was to rule all nations with the rod of iron. This is Christ. And the woman would be a symbol for Israel. And we've seen on other nights, a woman represents a church. Jeremiah 6:2. I have likened the daughter of Zion to a delicate and to a lovely and delicate woman. So it's a symbol for the church. Okay, so this is Israel, God's people, the church. And then there's another sign. This is verse 3. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great and fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Does that sound familiar?
Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. And 7 diadems on his heads. Now, we talked about this on previous nights. And the beast that had the 7 heads and the 10 horns is also mentioned in chapter 13. And then this beast that's mentioned with 10 horns is also mentioned in Daniel chapter 7. And in all those cases, we see that this is Rome. The difference here is that in Revelation 13, we saw that the crowns are on the 10 horns because the royal, during the time of the papacy, the monarchies were all spread out throughout Europe. There's a monarchy here, a monarchy there, France and England, and there's Spain. There's a king all over the place, right? The 10 divisions, the 10 horns. But here in chapter 12, where's the crowns? Let's see.
His heads.
On his heads, on the 7 heads. And what does the 7 heads symbolize? The 7 hills
Of Rome.
of Rome. So the crowns on the heads in Rome, there is a Caesar in Rome. This is not papal Rome, this is pagan Rome. This is the empire of Rome, right? And it's also symbolized as the great red dragon, which is also Satan, so it's Satan working through the Roman Empire. And people get confused by this. They said, look in verse 9, it says that this dragon is the old serpent called the devil and Satan. Revelation 12 verse 9, right?
It tells you.
It tells you right there. So it's the devil. But it's also Rome. How is it both? Well, if you look at, like, for example, the 2 clear descriptions of the devil in the Old Testament, you have Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. And in both of those passages, it starts by describing a pagan king and then switches midstream. It doesn't even give you a warning. Just switches midstream and starts talking about the devil. In Isaiah 14, it's talking about the king of Babylon, the context. And then starting in verse 12, it switches and says, how are you fallen from heaven? Oh, Lucifer, son of the morning. And oh, that's not the king of Babylon anymore. But it's drawing a parallel between the two. Because Satan is, these evil earthly kings are like Satan in character. It's drawing a parallel between the two. And who is the one working through these evil kings to cause problems in the world? It's Satan. So Satan works through them. Right? Same thing in Ezekiel 28, starts talking about the king of Tyre, and then whoop, switches and starts talking about this covering cherub. And then you say that can't be the king of Tyre anymore. So same thing here. This is Satan, but it's also the Roman Empire. It's Satan working through the Roman Empire. You see that?
Yes.
It's a parallel between the two. Okay.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Quick question on Revelations 12:9,
Yes, sir.
where it says, called the devil and Satan.
Yes. There's two different words. You know, they mean two different things. Devil is just a common word for demons in general, right?
Yeah.
Satan means adversary.
I
That's
just
literally
don't
what it
understand
means.
why they would put it, how it's written, the devil and Satan. It's like there's two.
Oh, well, that's what he's called. He's called by both things. That's the idea. He's called the devil and Satan.
Diabolos is devil, and Satan, Satan, is the adversary.
Yeah, it's from Hebrew, the adversary. Yeah. So yeah. It's like when it says, where Paul says, death and hell are swallowed up in victory. It's the same thing. It's two different words for the same idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just, and
Yeah.
it throws me.
Well, it's one. Okay. Well, I mean, look at it. The great dragon. So it's one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The great dragon was cast out. That old serpent called the devil and Satan. So he's called both things.
Devil and Satan.
He's got two names, but it's talking about one dragon, which is the old serpent, who's called the devil and Satan. So he's got two names. Does that mean, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah.
That
It's
and
Yeah.
was really before
Well,
the.
Yeah.
it's like
What
saying,
is it saying?
this is Josh and Joshua. They're
Yeah.
known by both names.
You can go, or his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God. There's several names. You know what I mean? So that's the
Good,
idea.
thank you so much.
No problem.
Sorry to get off that.
That's okay. Okay, so now it goes on. We see that this is Rome, is the dragon, the devil working through it, and the woman gives birth to the man-child. So this is Israel giving birth to Jesus. And it goes on with the story. It says, the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth to devour her child as soon as it was born. Did that happen to Jesus? Did the dragon try to kill the man-child as soon as he was born?
Yes, Herod.
Yes. And here's a artist depiction of what is called the massacre of the innocents, right? Herod was jealous that another king was arising, and he didn't want that to happen. He tried to spoil the prophecy, right? Just like Saul tried to kill David so he could stay king, right? And so he had all the babies in Bethlehem under the age of 2 slaughtered. And of course, you can't foil God's prophecy. God found a way around this, right? But that's what happened, unfortunately. Now, who is this red dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns? It is, of course, we looked at it. This is Rome, the 7 crowns on his head. So think about it this way. Who was it that tried to kill Jesus? It says the dragon tried to devour the man-child. Who tried to kill Jesus? Well, you guys already said.
Roman Empire.
It was Herod, and he was simply a Roman puppet governor.
Right.
That's all he was. He was an official of the Roman state, the Roman Empire. So it was Rome persecuting Jesus and the church.
You could not be more fitting that Herod be that, because Herod was really evil. He killed his children, he killed ex-wives, he killed anybody. He was suspicious of everybody.
Yep,
That's
absolutely.
right.
So the devil used Herod, he used the Roman Empire to try and get his job. Okay, it goes on. The woman then fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God that they should feed her there 1,260 days. What is this time period? This is the 1,260 years of the Dark Ages, right? And this was from about 538 to 1798 AD. Notice this is jumping through history quickly. It's just giving the high points, right? It goes into Jesus is born, tried to kill him, and then the woman's fled into the wilderness for 1,000 years. It's just hitting the high points, right? So the woman's in the wilderness during this time. And it said the dragon persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. So the church is persecuted, right? It's not just, it's as if Satan is saying, look, I'm going to try and get Jesus, but then where does Jesus go? It says the man-child's caught up to God and to his throne. So now, since I can't get God himself, he's not physically as a man on this earth anymore, I'll go for the next best thing. And I'll attack the church, right? And you know, any parent knows that if somebody really diabolical wants to hurt a parent, the worst way to do it is to go after that person's child, right? The parents will tell you they'd rather themselves be hurt than their children, right?
Yeah.
And so Satan hates God, and so he attacks God's children in order to get at God. So the dragon persecutes the male child, or persecutes the woman who gave birth to the male child. Notice this also, from Israel, as the 12 with the 12 tribes, the woman with the 12 crowns, right, or 12 stars, to the church now hiding in the wilderness. It has one symbol. It's the woman, right? It just goes from one to the other as if there's no transition. And to God, it doesn't matter. You're part of the church. Didn't matter if it was in Jewish times and now in the Christian era. It's just the church. It's all one, right? It's just all the same symbol. Then the woman fled into the wilderness. Now, and she hid there for the 1,260 years. This is an artist's depiction of the Waldensians in Europe. And there was several different groups that literally hid in the wilderness during the time where the Church of Rome was persecuting, any true believers. And here is a depiction.
Joshua,
Yes,
you had a question.
That picture looked like a nice place though.
it does.
It does.
Look nice in the house, right?
Yeah.
The cool thing about this was, you know, they were in the wilderness there, and it's a beautiful area,
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful.
It's in the Alps.
But it's hard to get to,
Oh,
and that
really?
was the point. And so it was hard to the authorities who wanted to come and take out anybody who was not following the Roman Church. It was hard to get to them there. That's why they lived out here in the middle of nowhere, to hide.
By the way, this is also the verse, you know, this woman is supposed to be married, right? It
Yeah.
is 1,260 years.
Yeah, right?
Not married.
That's not
That's
marriage.
not-
That's not marriage. No singular woman lives for 1,000 years, right?
Right.
This obviously is a symbol
This is-
for the church.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a map of the mountains, some of the mountains that the Waldensians hid in. And there was different groups. There was the Albigensians and the Waldensians. The Waldensians are the famous ones, but there was many different groups that hid in the wilderness during this Dark Ages, right? And you can see these mountains, how they're just all over the place. And it was very hard to trek into there and find them. And so it was as if God set this area up in northern Italy and in the Alps and so forth so that people could hide in that area. You could not design a natural fortress better.
Right.
For all these, you know, you had to know the terrain. They sent people after them to go find the Waldensians, and they would just disappear because they knew the area. They knew where to hide, you know? Almost like David when he was hiding from Saul, and he knew all the caves, you know, because he was a shepherd. He knew all the areas to hide, right? That's the idea. So how long did the woman hide in the wilderness? Until when? Well, what was the time period of it, right?
1798.
Absolutely. The church would hide in the wilderness until the end of the 1,260 years, until 1798. The church would hide. Okay. Now, at the end of this chapter, and we're not going to go through all of it, but just, you know, we hit the high points. But at the end of this chapter, it talks about, first it was the woman with the crown of 12 stars. Then she's hiding in the wilderness. And now it's talking about the remnant of the woman. So this is toward the end, right? The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. The remnant of her seed. So that's the remainder. The few that are left, right?
My translation says, with the rest of her offspring.
The rest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's left, right? The idea is the remnant, the remainder, right? And you guys have, well, I'll talk about this in a second, but and it says, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. What is a remnant?
The last one.
It is a small remaining piece of the original, right? A small remaining piece. So how was God's church described in the apostles' days? That would be the original church that Jesus set up, the apostolic church. How was it described? 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. This is Paul speaking. But if I tarry long, that thou mayest know how thou oughtest to behave thyself in the house of God, which is the church of the living God. Notice how it's described. The pillar and ground of the truth. The pillar and ground of the truth. What does that mean?
Yes.
The pillar is something that holds the structure up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it upholds the truth, right? It's that pillar that upholds the house. The ground's the foundation, right? That you build on. So the church is described as the pillar and the ground of the truth,
The truth.
right?
Should be solid.
So it should be solid on the truth. Now, are there good Christians in every denomination?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. It should be an easy one, right? But what does God say at the end of time? Revelation 18 verse 4, he says, and I heard another verse from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. So there's good people in all these different denominations, but God is calling people out, right? So even though there's good people in every denomination, can every denomination be described as the pillar and ground of truth?
No.
No. Not if they're not teaching the full counsel of God on, we just looked at a few of the subjects, right? And there's major errors in even the most basic stuff. Like, do the commandments still stand? Right? Basic errors in that stuff. So you would not be able to say that they're the pillar and ground of the truth. Even though there's good people in them, God's trying to call them out. And here's some of the examples that we looked at. What happens when you die? The average teaching in the world today is in most churches today is a misunderstanding on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're taught you go straight to heaven or hell when you die, and it's
Yeah,
just
that's
not
not
biblical.
normal.
The truth about hell, lies about end-time prophecies. I say lies, I don't want to be too accusatory. It's a misunderstanding, right? People just taught what they're taught, and it's things that I used to believe.
Like the
until I studied it.
rapture.
Like the rapture, right? Doesn't mean these people are lost. It just means there's a misunderstanding.
There's a confusion. Yeah.
You can misunderstand things and still be have a saving relationship with the Lord. And a big one here is that the idea that the Sabbath has been changed to this day of the sun, right? Sunday. So, if you can't say all these other denominations are the pillar and ground of the truth, the remnant, like the original, the apostolic church, the remnant of them, then who is this remnant of prophecy? Let's identify it. And by the way, I didn't talk about this symbol here. Really quickly, I wanted to mention this. Does anyone do any selling?
No.
Yeah, do some selling, right? So this is a remnant pile. You ever see those at the fabric store, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so what
In
happens?
Joann's
You have at Joann's.
Fabric.
Beverly's.
Or Beverly's, okay.
I know every square inch of that store.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, boy.
How much time you gotta wait, huh? Do they have good seats there?
No, they do have some cool stuff there.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I always look, where's the seats? Where can I sit down?
I'm gonna start my shawl this next week.
Your shawl, okay. Prayer shawls. So remnant piles, what they do is you have the original cloth, right? And there's lots of yards and yards of this material. And then there's the scraps that are left. So if you have a garment, and you mess it up, and you need to sew a patch or something, right? You go to the remnant pile and you try to find a match to the original, right? That's what a remnant is. So this concept of the remnant in prophecy, it's this remaining few that stayed faithful to the truth throughout history. So what happens is, from the days of the apostles until the end of time, there's a strand of truth throughout history of people who kept the truth and weren't necessarily part of the official established church during the Dark Ages and so forth, right? You know, it's almost as if there's two streams. There's the official church that became corrupted, and then there's this small group, the remnant, right? And it doesn't mean that everyone over here is lost, nor does it mean that everyone over here is saved. But they're a group of people who held on to the truth. That's the idea. The remnant. Okay. So, who is this remnant of prophecy? Let's look at the identifying characteristics in prophecy. We're going through this quick. This is good. It would not exist officially as an organization between the time periods of 538 through 1790. Because where was the church during this time? It says the woman was where?
In the wilderness.
Hiding in the wilderness. So is she out in the open saying, here I am, an official organization? No, she's hiding in the wilderness during this time. It would arise to do its end-time work after 1798. During that time period, it's hiding in the wilderness. What other passages speak of, in Revelation, speak of God's last day movement? The three angels' messages in Revelation chapter 14. So let's jump chapter 13. We've looked at that in depth before. And chapter 13 ends with the mark of the beast, which is the end of time, right?
Yeah.
So we know the context here is the end of time. And then chapter 14, you have the three angels' messages. And then, you'll notice the three angels' messages is 1 through about 12. Well, it's really about 6 through 12. And then right after the three angels' messages, the second coming of Christ is depicted, starting in verse 14. You guys see that? In fact, does anyone have any title chapters around that verse?
Reaping the earth's
Harvest.
Reaping the earth's harvest. That's the second coming, right? When the angels are sent out to reap, and the weeds are gathered up and burned, and the wheat is gathered up into the barn, right? That's the reaping at the end. So just before the reaping, which is the second coming, you have these three angels' messages right at the end of time. So that would describe God's last day movement and message. Now, it's described as three angels. And we'll look at what an angel symbolizes here in a second. But I want to see what it says. Starting in verse 6. Is that where we are? Yeah, verse 6. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Now, who does the preaching? Who has God commissioned to do the preaching? Does he ask angels to preach for him?
No.
No. Who did he commission to preach for him? Who is to be his witnesses?
At the church.
The church.
The church, right? Absolutely, the church. So right away we should be thinking, here's an angel, but this is a symbol, right? Because who does the preaching? And this is all over the world, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Ah, that's a very particular message, right? Not the hour of his judgment will come, but the hour of his judgment is come. It's now.
So it's present.
Right? Present tense. And worship him that made, and then it quotes the fourth commandment. Heavens, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of water, right? That's a quote from Exodus 20. Exodus 20, when it lists the fourth commandment, in verses 8 through 11, it says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is, right? This is quoting the fourth commandment. Worship him who made, worship the Creator, right? So what does an angel symbolize in prophecy? A messenger. It's often used as a symbol for God's people. I'll give you an example. Malachi 3 verse 1. The word Malachi comes from the Hebrew malach, and that word is the word in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for angel. That's the word that you use. So malach, Malachi, angel, messenger. And the word can be used to describe what we think of as an angel, right? Like this picture, this angelic being with wings, right? It can be used to describe one of them. Or it can be used to describe a human who simply has a message from God, right? Either one. It depends on the context. Same word. And you just have to know which context, right? So an angel is a symbol for a messenger. You guys get that? So here's a quote from Malachi 3 verse 1. It says, "Behold, I will send my messenger." The Hebrew word there is malach, same word for angel. "I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me." Does that sound familiar? Do you know which Old Testament prophecy this is? Who is this talking about? "I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me."
Is it John?
That's John the
I was
Baptist.
gonna say John the Baptist.
That's John the Baptist. Was John the Baptist an angel with wings?
No.
No.
But the Hebrew word malach is used to describe it. You see that?
Yeah.
And so somebody who's simply a preacher for God
Is it malach?
is malach, angel, right? You guys see how that works? "I will send my messenger, and he will prepare the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant." So the Lord will come to the temple, and he is the messenger of the covenant. Now this is describing who? Who is the Lord? Who is the messenger of the covenant? That's Jesus. And he's also described here as malach, but Jesus is not an angel, right? He came as a man. Well, he's God, but he came as a man, right?
Yeah.
He didn't come with wings, right? So again, the word malach,
Was just also
the angel,
Jesus.
is a symbol for a messenger. Depends on the context. So John the Baptist and Jesus here were both symbolized by angels, but they weren't literally angels. The word can also mean messenger. So when we see this last day movement of these three angels' messages preaching the truth, we're thinking this is a movement of God in the church preaching a message. You guys see that? Okay. What else should we notice about this last day movement? "And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven." So here's this angel. And it says that he preaches, right? So that's usually humans are commissioned with the job of witnessing and preaching. And it's to every nation, right? So this is a worldwide message, a worldwide movement. And it preaches a message that the judgment has come, that it is come. Not that it's coming in the future, but that it is coming. It's got a judgment message, right? And it calls people to worship the Creator in the way that the Creator has specified, right? And the fourth commandment is quoted here. So, here's a few of the characteristics. It would not officially exist as an organization during the Dark Ages. Churches hiding in the wilderness during that time. It would arise after 1798. It would preach a worldwide message. It says to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. It preaches that the judgment has come. And it preaches on the true Sabbath of God. Okay, what else? What else should we notice about this movement? The second angel's message. That was the first angel's message. This is the second angel's message. And there followed another angel saying, "Babylon is fallen, is fallen." Excuse me, that great city. For she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. So this last day movement would expose Babylon. And expose her false teachings, which is the wine of her fornication. We talked about that on a previous night. So they would expose Babylon. That's one of their jobs. So, this last day movement would not arise until after 1798. It would be a worldwide movement. No, not all churches are worldwide. I don't know if you know that. Not all churches are. It would be a worldwide movement. It would preach that the judgment has come. It would point people back to the true Sabbath of God. It would expose Mystery Babylon, the great harlot. Now right there, we could just stop there and most denominations would not fit all these, right? Especially these last few. This message of who Babylon is not taught far and wide anymore at all. It used to be taught by every single Protestant denomination. You know, they had differences on various doctrines. The Lutherans, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, and all these different, right? All these different, the Anglicans, they all had these different ideas on certain things. But when it came to who the Antichrist was,
They know.
they all agreed.
Hmm.
Every single one of them agreed it's the papacy. The only church that didn't agree was the papacy.
Yeah.
But all the other ones all agreed, right? And now you can go to a seminary from all these different denominations,
They don't.
and nobody teaches this anymore.
No, they
Huh.
Why?
Wow,
I was
yeah.
just gonna say,
Why?
why?
Why? It's not. It's not something you say in polite company, right? It's not politically correct anymore to come out. It's very easy, and it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings to say the Antichrist doesn't exist. It's in the future. It's coming later. Because now you're not pointing to anyone who exists today, right? So you could get away with that. You don't hurt anyone's feelings. That's politically correct. But to say it's Rome, oh, you're old-fashioned. That's
That's
1500s. And we have relationships with the cardinal in town, and you just can't say that stuff. And you try and teach these things in most seminaries today, you'll have a problem. You'll have a problem, right? It's not that the Bible has
To me, it
changed.
seems like a lot are just plain afraid to call them out.
Afraid. Yeah.
Compromising.
Yeah, they're
Very
compromising
strong.
to the
They're
world.
so
Very
Yes.
soon, these messages on who the papacy is will be called hate speech.
Will be
And it's already
Oh, hate
called hate
speech.
speech.
Oh,
It's
my goodness.
already in certain countries, you can't say this stuff.
In
You
Canada,
can't say this stuff.
in Canada
In
already.
Canada, you have
It's in
problems. In
Canada already.
Australia, right?
Yeah.
You can get in big legal trouble for simply preaching what the Bible says.
Boy. Yeah.
What else? More characteristics. What else should we notice about this last day movement? The third angel's message. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If any man worship the beast in his image." So now it's exposing not just the beast, but also his image, which was the second beast, the image to the beast, right? "And receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation." So, in addition to all these other things, it preaches a warning against the mark of the beast.
I was thinking about that, say the mark on the forehead. Catholics on Ash Wednesday
Oh yeah,
have the ash on their forehead.
we're gonna study the mark of the beast maybe either next week or the following week. It's one of our last two messages to study.
Great.
Is that
So
heavy?
we'll go into it in
It's
depth.
heavy.
That's heavy, huh?
It's a heavy subject, yes. It's one of our last couple that we have left. We'll go into it in detail.
Looking forward to that.
Me
Absolutely.
too.
So what other clues identify the end time remnant? Revelation 12 verse 17. We've already looked at this, but I want to notice it one more time. Revelation 12 verse 17. "The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ." Now right away, most churches would say, that seems like a problem for most churches, because they say, once you believe in Jesus,
They're saying,
you no longer have to keep the
come on.
commandments of God, right?
Yeah, that's the whole.
But this one says both. The remnant keep the commandments of God and they have
Man,
the
that's-
testimony of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
So this would be a commandment-keeping church. And again, right away, we've got a problem with the majority of denominations, not people, because you could be saved being in any denomination. I'm talking about the teachings of
Right.
the majority of the denominations. The majority teach that it's okay to break especially the fourth commandment. It's thrown out the window.
It's also repeated on chapter 14, the same phrase.
Same idea, right?
In verse 12.
Verse 12, yes. Yeah, the
Commandments of God.
commandments of God and
In the
faith
face of
of
Jesus.
Jesus. Yeah, absolutely. So it says they keep the commandments of God and they have the testimony of Jesus. My question is, what is the testimony of Jesus? And you might say, well, that's simple. That's just somebody who preaches what Jesus preaches, right? Well, there's a specific Bible definition for this. Notice this. Revelation 19, verse 10. This is, in context, Revelation 19. What happens is, John, the revelator, who wrote the book of Revelation, he sees an angel, And the angel says to him, the message that I just gave to you, these are the true words of God. And John hears that and he thinks, wait, so you're God? He thinks because the angel says,
Oh.
these are the true words of God, he misunderstands and thinks, oh, this is God. So John falls on his face, saying, oh, I'm in the presence of God, I better bow down, right? And the angel responds to him and says, no, you don't have to bow to me. I'm just an angel, right? You read the context. So Revelation 19, and he tells him, don't, get off your feet, basically, right? Which is much different than when somebody goes to visit the Pope and bows down to him, right? The Pope has no problem with that. In fact, every bishop, when they're ordained, they lie on their face in front of the Pope.
Yeah.
He has no problem with this. But an angel says, no, off your feet. You don't bow to me, right? There's a problem.
And he
Well,
even calls himself the the God basically, and God doesn't do that.
Yeah, we're not supposed to do that to anyone but God himself, right?
Yeah.
But I guess the Pope would say, well, that was just an angel. The Pope's higher than the angels.
Yeah.
That's what they teach.
That's right.
That's what they teach.
Terrible.
So looking here in verse 9, and he saith unto me, right, blessed are they which are called into the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he saith unto me, these are the true sayings of God. Verse 10, and I fell at his feet to worship him. Because he misunderstood.
Yeah.
He said, oh, there's true sayings of God, so you're God? So I fell at his feet to worship him, and he said unto me, see thou doest not. Don't do it. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God. Don't worship me, worship God. And then he says this, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So what is the testimony of Jesus?
That's the spirit of God.
It is the spirit of prophecy. So this would be a church that has a focus on the commandments of God
And the Bible.
and Bible prophecy. And we'll talk more about the spirit of prophecy on another night. So Revelation 12 verse 17 again gives two more characteristics of this remnant. It says, the remnant of her seed which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus. And the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So let's identify this end-time remnant of Bible prophecy. First, a very quick overview of church history. We had during the Dark Ages, the Roman Church, right? And then there was a Reformation.
Right.
And it started, we say it's 1517 when Martin Luther pounded the 95 Thesis on the church door. It really started before then. That's the official date that we give. But it started before then. Men like Wycliffe came before Luther, and he got his ideas from the truth that was kept through the Waldensians. And what they would do is they were not only hiding in the wilderness. The Waldensians would take a page of the Bible, or even just a few verses, and they would hide it in their clothes, in the stitching. And they would go to town, and they would do business, going door to door, doing business, and so forth. And if they sensed the person might be open, it may not be somebody who would tell on them, they would, see for an opportunity to witness.
Wow.
And they would share the truth slowly but surely, and it began to infiltrate in Europe. Slowly but surely. And that gave rise to men like Wycliffe and Luther and these men eventually.
Wycliffe, that was like in the 1300s, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. He's called the Morning Star of the
Yeah, the
Reformation.
14th century.
Yeah, he's before
1300s,
Luther.
roughly.
In England.
Yeah, and then
We
Huss
saw a
was
lot of
before
those.
Luther.
No.
Holy Land.
Huss is after.
Yeah.
Okay,
The Bohemian.
Yeah.
okay. You got it. I
Huss is in
forget.
the 1400s,
Okay.
in the later part.
Okay. So yeah, here we go. So we had the Waldensians, and they held to the Bible, and they hid it, right, and shared it among the people. Then you have men like John Huss, and they restored truth on obedience to God. And then you have Martin Luther, and he restores the truth on how salvation cannot be earned. There's no ritual, there's no even commandment of God that you can keep that can earn you salvation. It's by grace.
Amen.
Amen?
Amen.
And so slowly but surely these truths are starting to be restored. It's as if the church started from the Apostles' Day and went downhill, and then it slowly started to come back uphill. And it wasn't an overnight thing. It had to slowly climb back out of the Dark Ages. So these men start restoring things one after another. And Luther brings back the doctrine that salvation is by grace. And then Calvin comes, and he teaches about the sovereignty of God, right? And he starts restoring these truths back. And then the Anabaptists come, and they restore the truth on what baptism is. It's not a sprinkling of an infant.
Amen.
It's baptism is by immersion. It's to symbolize death. You get buried in the water,
Amen.
right? A baby can't make that decision
That's
to
right.
die and be born again.
Amen.
So it's for adults, or at least you gotta be able to know what you're doing. And then Wesley comes, and he restores the idea of the holiness of God, right? He starts the Methodist movement, and they were very much taught about purity, right? So all these truths are starting to be restored. And you see how God is building his movement back, right? And these were all great men, and they all shared as much of the truth as they knew at the time, right? And then William Miller came
Yeah.
in the Great Awakening, and he started preaching about the 1844 message, that the Day of Atonement was going to be fulfilled. And this is the time, I mentioned him, but he's a leader during the time of the Great Awakening. And it was a major movement in America and Western Europe. And this led to the Advent movement, and then the doctrines such as the Sabbath, the truth about hell, the truth about what hellfire is, and all these other various doctrines get restored right before the end of time. Now here's a quote. This is from Roger Williams. He's a great man. He makes a really good point here. He says, the Lutherans cannot be drawn to go beyond what Luther saw. Whatever part of his will our God has revealed to Calvin, they, the Lutherans, will rather die than embrace it. And the Calvinists, you see, stick fast to where that great man of God, who yet saw not all things. This is a misery much to be lamented. So the idea here is that what happens is that each one of these men, go back to these list of men here, they all had great truths that they restored. And they all a movement started after their names, right? Luther's, the Lutheran Church, right? And Wesley started the Methodist Church and so forth, right? But the problem is that the people, they would cling to the ideas of these founders, and they wouldn't go any farther. So when God rose up more truth, said, no, we don't want that. We already got. We're going to hold on to what Luther taught us, right? That's the idea. And this is what Roger Williams is talking about. He says, the Lutherans can't be drawn to go beyond what Luther saw. And whatever part of his will our God has revealed to Calvin, they will rather die than embrace it. And the Calvinists, you see, stick fast to where they were left by that great man of God, who yet saw not all things. So the idea is that Luther didn't know all truth. Calvin didn't know all truth. Wesley didn't know all truth. They were great men, and they preached as much as they knew in their day. But you got to keep going, because God's got more truth and more truth to be revealed, right? And so you had this descent into the Dark Ages, and then this climbing out of it. And each one of these men were a stepping stone on the way out. But you don't stop there. You keep going as more truth from the Bible gets revealed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then he says this, Roger Williams, for though they were precious shining lights in their time, yet God has not revealed his whole will to them. And were they now living, they would be as ready and willing to embrace further light as they had received.
Yep.
If they were alive, if Luther was alive, he would say, don't just go with what I said.
Right.
Follow the Bible, right?
Wow, yeah.
And keep going and learn more. So, who is this remnant of prophecy? We've looked at a list of characteristics. It's kind of like how we did when we looked at a list of characteristics describing the Antichrist. We saw a whole list, and only one organization fit all of them, right? Well, it's very similar to God's remnant at the end of time. There's a list of characteristics here, and there's only one characteristic, there's only one church that fits all of these characteristics. It does not mean that this organization is perfect, or that being a member of this organization makes you automatically saved, because the opposite is true about the Catholic Church, right? There's many people who are God's people in the Catholic Church, but the organization there's a problem with. The teachings there's a problem with, and God says, come out from my people. So there's saved people in every denomination in the world.
That's right.
But there's a remnant that God's described. And I believe, friends, there's only one organization that fits every single one of these characteristics, and we'll go over them again. And that is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I believe it is God's last day remnant movement. Now, let's look at these. It came out of the Advent movement in 1844 AD. Preaches a worldwide message. We'll look at that. You know, the SDA Church is officially in 215 of the 237 countries of the world. And the other ones, it's there, but you have to be unofficial because, you get killed in some of these Muslim countries and so forth. But they're there. We're all over the world. I have a list of, it was not put out by the Adventist Church, it's put out by some other missionary organization. And it has a list of all the different denominations, and then it's a graph, all the denominations, and then this way it has all the different countries. And it puts a dot if this denomination is in this country, right? And you'd be surprised, a lot of these denominations that we think of as really big, Lutheran and Methodist, they're only in a handful of other countries besides America and Europe. They're only in a handful of other countries. But there was 2 churches that and all of them almost. And it's only 2.
Yeah.
The Roman Catholic Church
And
and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Very interesting.
Very
Only
interesting.
2. So it came up after the Advent movement, preaches a worldwide message, preaches that the judgment has come. Have you heard that?
Yep.
Have you heard that message
Yes.
here? Preaches on the Sabbath of God. Calls people to worship the Creator, right? Who made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is. Preaches against the great harlot. You heard that?
That's true.
Preaches against the mark of the beast. We preached on that, and we'll do it again next week or the following week. It's a commandment-keeping church, and has the testimony of Jesus and the spirit of prophecy. Like I said, the SDA Church is in 215 of the 237 world countries officially. The other ones were there too. Virtually every country on the planet, there's almost 20 million members.
21 or so this week.
We've jumped, right?
Yeah,
These are old statistics.
Right.
21 million now.
That is that
I
the patient?
did this a few weeks ago. 20,000 pastors around the world. Almost 300,000 employees.
Oh, jeez.
So,
Okay, we're all awake now.
Yeah, we're all.
And this is not to toot the church horn. This is to let you know, because a lot of people have never even heard of this organization. And they don't realize the worldwide presence. So allow me to toot the horn a little bit. Publishing in 974 languages.
Wow.
80,000 plus churches around the world. The Seventh-day Adventist Church's educational system is the second largest Christian school system in the world, only after the Roman Catholic Church. So again, there's 2 worldwide churches. It's the Roman Church and the Adventist Church, this little group that almost no one's ever heard of. And then this massive power that everybody knows about. Only 2. I think that's very interesting. We have the largest Protestant educational system in the world. The Seventh-day Adventist Church has a total of 7,500 educational institutions. Here's some SDAs of note. Secretary Dr. Ben Carson. Right? Very nice guy.
Did you meet him?
What's that?
Did you meet him?
No, it was our brother that likes to sing downstairs.
That guy,
He
yeah.
went to school.
Mr. Kim.
Yes, he went to school with him. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. Yeah.
Mr.
Cool.
Kim. Do you always want to
I actually
sing
met him.
downstairs?
You did?
at a town meeting, yeah.
I can't meet.
He came to preach one time, years ago.
Very nice guy.
Yeah, very nice.
Yes, I know that, I know him. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because he showed us a picture, remember?
Yeah, showed the
Yes.
picture when they were here.
Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth.
Sojourner Truth was a Seventh-day Adventist. She's buried in an Adventist cemetery there, next to some of the Adventist pioneers. Her funeral eulogy was given by Uriah Smith, I believe, which was one of the early editors of the Adventist Review and Herald. Frederick Douglass attended the Adventist Church for years, and his daughter was a member.
Wow.
Very cool. Here's a article from the Adventist Review, which is one of the church publications. I'll say this about Adventist publishing and Adventist institutions in general. You know, we've heard of the Jehovah's Witnesses, right?
Mm.
You know that they only have one publishing association, and everything must be published through the Watchtower Society.
Yes.
Everything, right? And their members are told when you go, if you ever have a Jehovah's Witness go to your door, try and give them a pamphlet. If
They
they're
won't take
faithful,
it.
they won't take
They're
it.
gonna take
Right?
it. Oh.
Because there's only, everything must come through this organization, right?
Oh.
That's not how we work. We're very
Independent.
egalitarian in that sense, you know, where there's publishing here, you started publishing over here, there's all these different, you know, and it's free. kind of
That's
thing.
why lots of times we'll get things in the mail, it'll look really good.
Uh-huh.
I always flip to the back, and if it says Watchtower,
Yeah,
mm,
yeah, there's some
you
problems.
have to be really
Some
careful.
problems with the doctrines there,
Yeah.
definitely. So this article is talking about how it's
The churches.
a record number of churches open, the speed at which the churches are being planted. It's a very rapidly growing church. Here's a quote from an article in the religious section of USA Today. Has drawn much attention to the North American Adventism, calling it the fastest growing Christian denomination in North America. People have never even heard of this church, and it's the fastest growing Christian denomination in America. I think God has his hands on this movement.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Southern Baptists, most mainline denominations are declining, but the Adventist church is growing at 2.5% per year. Blue Zones. This is an interesting book. That was written by a guy who's not an Adventist, he's just a doctor. You can get a copy of it at Amazon or whatever. And it's a health book. And what the guy does is he says there are certain areas in the world that the people in that area are very healthy. And he lists a few of them. What is it? It's Okinawa, Japan. What's the other one?
Sardinians in Italy.
Yeah, there's one
Yeah.
place in Italy, right?
Yeah.
And then Loma Linda,
Loma Linda.
California. And the reason why Loma Linda is one of them is because there's major Adventist universities there. There's Loma Linda and La Sierra University in that area. So there's a lot of Adventists all in that one area down there by LA. And the health message that the church teaches, the church SDAs have been studied in depth. You know, in this book they go through and study them. And they find that these people live an average of 10 years longer than most Americans. And here's a picture of this. This is from the USA Today article, and it's got this picture of this 90-something-year-old Adventist lady, and she's still driving.
Wow.
And I thought that was kind of cool. This grandma's still kicking, right? You know, God gave him. He told Moses that if you are obedient to me,
Absolutely.
I will not put upon you the diseases that all the nations, other
That's
nations,
right.
right?
That's right.
Right? And if you study into Egypt's history, they had all the chronic diseases we have today. The hypertension, the blood pressure, the diabetes. They had all those. They can see them in the mummies, right? They were all in. And the same things we see today, but you see a very low rate of these things among the Adventist church because of this health message. So it's this blessing that God has given to this church to share with the world, that we can, he wants us to be happy and healthy. So that's very interesting. We've been studying in the book Blue Zones. So, the question is, Joshua, you're just trying to get us to join your church, telling us that this is
Amen.
the remnant of prophecy. The answer is, of course I am.
Joshua, where's he in scripture?
Yeah, right.
He's back in the Old Testament.
Of course, I wouldn't be a member of the Adventist church if I didn't believe
Amen.
that
That's
it's teaching the truth. And of course I would be happy if everyone joined my church. But that's not going to save anyone. You can be a member of an organization, you could be an Israelite.
Amen.
An Israelite of the Israelites and be lost, right? Paul says, I was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, but I count that all dumb. It means nothing if I don't have Christ, right? And all these other people in all the other denominations in the world, they may not have all this light and all this truth that the Adventist church has, but if they're following the Lord with all their heart and they don't know any better, people will be in the kingdom. So there is no salvation by denomination.
Amen.
He made that very clear. Adventists are no better than anyone else, but they have a higher responsibility
Amen.
because they've been given a lot of knowledge.
Absolutely.
A lot of knowledge. And so our job is simply to share it with the world, and we're held accountable.
Especially now, after all of this that we're going through.
After learning it,
Because
right?
we know about it.
Because you
now.
know it,
There's no-
right?
No excuse.
Absolutely. So, let's look at these characteristics. And this is a good amount. This is a good amount of characteristics. Came from the Advent movement in 1844. So that's after 1798, after the church is hiding in the wilderness, right? Preaches a worldwide message. This is definitely a worldwide church. Preaches that the judgment has come. That's the pre-Advent judgment, that the judgment's going on right now in heaven. It started in 1844. Preaches on the true Sabbath of God. Preaches against the great harlot, Babylon. And it preaches a warning against the mark of the beast. You know, you go to most churches today and you want to know about the mark of the beast, and there's confusion. There's this idea and that idea, and nobody really knows. We're going to make that very clear. Either next week or the following week, we'll go through that in depth. It's a commandment-keeping church. Keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus, which is the spirit of prophecy. So my question is, did I make up all these characteristics, or did we see these in the Bible?
We saw them.
They were found in the Bible, right? So, if this is true, if all these characteristics, and it's pretty clear here, why do people still reject the idea of the remnant? I'll look into a story here, and we're almost done. And this is the story of Peter's denial of Christ. And you know, Peter, this is an artist's depiction, and it's a very well done.
Yes.
Yes.
It's very well done.
He looks right at
Catches
him.
the poignancy, and Peter's looking away.
Could you imagine?
And there's the three roosters, right?
Yep.
Three cocks after the cock crowed 3 times. Peter,
And Jesus
Jesus,
looking at
they're
him.
looking
and
at
Jesus looking at
I'm
him.
looking at him.
Peter was very brave when it came to physical altercation, right? Peter, I'm sure if Jesus had asked him, would be willing to climb the highest hill, you know, go on do some great feat for Jesus, right? He said, you know, Lord, when Jesus told him he's going to deny him, he said, no, I'm willing to die with you, right? And I don't believe Peter was lying. I think he was being sincere,
sure he was.
right?
I do.
Because when they
Absolutely.
came to arrest Jesus, what did Peter do? He
Chop
pulls
off
the
the
sword
ear.
out and he went to fight,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
He got the ear of
He got the ear off and
Marcus.
Jesus healed it, right? And did a Mike Tyson thing on, took his ear off. Jesus put it back on, right? Peter was willing to fight. He was willing to die.
Immediately.
But what happened when Peter faced
The multitude.
derision from other people, right? And being made fun of. And being associated with this man who was not accepted, right?
He got scared. He got cowardly.
Cowardly, right? It was as if he was embarrassed. Here you have the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leaders, the leaders in the church, condemning this man, and these people come to him and say, you're a part of this group, right? You were a follower of his. And he denies it. He's embarrassed. And, you know, some people would rather die than be embarrassed by what other people think about them, right? And I think that's the problem. It wasn't just Peter. Let's not just pick on him. All his disciples forsook him, right? I think one of the problems is that people don't want to be associated with some little sect that nobody ever heard of. You know? Who is this group? You know, and what are my other Christian friends going to think about me? Right?
No.
People are often, you know, we're more willing to go into battle than be made fun of or be thought of as something that's, you know, embarrassing. And I'll tell you, there's derision out there for Adventists. There are a lot of other churches that do not like the Adventist church and that will mock Adventist teachings. But I just gotta go with what the Bible says.
Amen.
Amen.
That's,
I think those
that's
other
been my
churches
formula.
are almost, I don't wanna say jealous, but it's almost like Seventh-day Adventists were given the knowledge, but they haven't. And so they're like, well, who are you to say, you
All
know?
these seminaries are wrong, right? All these
You're
great
right,
theologians are wrong.
right.
I get that so often. I'll give arguments. Here's Bible, and I say, well, yeah, but this guy said this. I'm like, yeah, but Bible. I don't care what the guy says. right?
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly,
And here's
the Bible.
But all these great seminaries, Bible, right?
Yeah.
You know? The name itself and what the church stands for is a rebuke, right? Just the name, Seventh-day Adventists, right away you're saying, you know, you guys are missing the fourth commandment, right? And nobody wants to be told they're wrong. Nobody wants to be told they're wrong. I don't want to be told they're wrong, right? Nobody wants to be told they're wrong, right?
Yeah.
And so nobody wants to admit that we miss something so obvious, right? You got two reactions to that. Either you go and investigate it and find out if it's true, or you put your guard up and you start fighting, right?
Yeah, don't take me out of my comfort zone.
Exactly, exactly. Well, we are warned in the last days that Satan will come and will deceive, right?
Yeah.
And here's the key to this. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 through 12. Even him, whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish. Why? Because they received not a love, of the truth. A love of the truth. It's not enough to have a casual view of the truth. You have to love the truth, right?
Amen.
Because if you love the Lord says, if you seek me with all your heart, then you will find me.
Pardon me.
But if you have this kind of laid back view of truth where, you know, what's convenient, if it falls in front of my lap, maybe I'll believe, you know, you got to seek it, right? And that is why so many reject it. It's because there's not a love of the truth. And if you don't receive a love of the truth, then you will receive the deception. It goes on.
That's right.
Because they received not a love of the truth that they might be saved. For this cause. So because they didn't have the love of the truth, it's not God's fault. It's because they didn't love the truth. For this cause, God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. That they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but have pleasure in unrighteousness. So friends, we need to, in these last days, have a love of the truth. Amen?
Amen. Amen.
And everything needs to be founded upon the scriptures. Not on one verse, on multiple, verse after verse after verse. And it all fits together, right? And that is the idea. So anything that I'm teaching here, challenge me. You got Bible verses? Challenge me, and let's go through them, and let's look at what does the bulk of Scripture say, you know, and study it out. And that's the idea. So again, I don't want to give the idea, I can say it over and over again, that Adventists are somehow better. That's not true at all. Not true at all. It's simply that you would expect in the last days that God has got to have somebody preaching the Bible correctly. And there's hundreds of denominations all teaching these various different doctrines. Which one's teaching the Bible correctly? You would expect if the devil has his last day movement, that God would have a last day people as well. That just have the truth. It doesn't mean they're saved necessarily. Individually can be lost or saved, doesn't matter. It depends on if they're following what they know, right? There's no salvation by membership. And there's people in every denomination who are good, godly people who don't know any better. And I believe that as we get closer to the end, the camps are going to start becoming more and more clear which group you're in. Because there's going to be a shaking. People are going to leave Babylon when they find the truth out because they don't know any better. And I believe there also will be a good amount of Adventists who are just nominal Adventists who don't even know what they believe in. They're going to join Babylon. And it's only going to be those who are faithful.
Amen.
Because we looked this morning and said, I will spew you out of my mouth,
Well,
right?
absolutely.
Exactly.
If
The
you're not-
lukewarm church,
the
number seven,
lukewarm.
that's where we're at right now.
That's what we looked at. And was it a perfect church?
Nope.
Absolutely not. God had plenty of rebukes for the last day church.
Yes.
They are not perfect, but they got a message, and it's their responsibility to share. So that's all I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
You
Absolutely.
guys have any questions?
That's heavy stuff, that's.
It
Heavy
is heavy.
stuff.
You asked for a heavy subject. So.
Yeah, but we like heavy subjects.
All right. Well, let's close with prayer. And next week or the week after, we'll do the Mark of the Beast. You guys can let me know which one. And we're almost done with this seminar. 2 more weeks.
Oh, wow.
Who would like to pray for us?
Let's pray.
Please.